Hello, everyone. My name is Gilda Ross. I'm the director of the GPS Parent Series. This is a program that I've been looking forward to a very long time, and I'm delighted that you are here. A few reminders: GPS is here to inspire, empower, inform, and it is a free resource thanks to the many generous annual sponsors that support GPS. They want families listen. So, our ask of all of you is share the resource, the free resource. Let someone know, a neighbor, a friend, someone across the street or across the country. Everyone's welcome here. There's no registration. Check out the past programs on our YouTube channel. There's something here for everyone. And in light of that, I want to tell you about some of the upcoming events that we have in the next few weeks. So next week, I'm also very excited to welcome David Yeager. David Yeager is a protege of Carol Dweck, who was with us many years ago, and now he is back continuing her important work. He'll be talking about what we get wrong when we try to motivate and communicate with young people. It's really a follow-up to what we're going to be talking about today. And that is next Wednesday. And then we have programming for young children and families of young children. So Mary Sheedy has come to us with the fifth edition of her book, Raising Your Spirited Child. So again, if you know someone with a spirited child, she'll be talking about children 3 to 9, with some examples of teens and preteens as well. Then this is a program you need to circle on your calendar. Whenever we welcome Lisa Demore, it's a special occasion. She is back with her second edition of the book Untangled, which talks about the stages of development that teenagers go through. She is brilliant, and she will be in conversation with Jessica Wallace, who has written a book called Never Enough. So this should be an interesting conversation on the 30th of October, noon and 7 p.m. Then we go into November and we'll be welcoming back good friends of ours. They have written a book called Motivating and how to build and how to foster a self-directed child. That's Sticksrud and Johnson, and that is on the 5th of November, and I know you'll want to listen in. Without further ado, how excited am I about today's program and about my partner today to introduce our wonderful speakers. It is Jessica Santee. She is the superintendent of Glenbard District 87, and she will take it away. Thanks, Jessica.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We really have a wonderful program, and I'm excited to be here with you and to learn with you. I'm the superintendent of Glenbard District 87, and it's truly my pleasure to welcome you to this conversation on rethinking career readiness and post-high school decision-making process. Such an important thing that we do, and we need to really focus our energy here. As educators, families, and community partners, our shared mission is to prepare our young people, not just for graduation, but for fulfilling their lives in meaningful ways as they leave us. So the research is very clear in this topic, right? Students thrive when their aspirations and their talents are connected to real world opportunities in the world of work. That's why today's session is so powerful as we bring this topic to you. We'll explore how authentic workplace experiences can help students make smarter decisions, not just about where they go after high school, but why they're going there and truly finding their passion and purpose. So in this discussion, we're so excited to have two exceptional leaders in this field with us today. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Ken Wallace, who served as superintendent of Main Township District 207 for 15 years. Under his leadership, the district built partnerships with more than 1,200 businesses to provide authentic workplace experiences for students. He also pioneered the use of advanced career and college analytics to help families make informed decisions about their return on investment of post-secondary options. Ken's model has been replicated across the country, and his work has earned national recognition, including being named the 2018 ACTE champion and one of EdTech's top 100 influencers. Joining him in the conversation today is also Dr. Jason Klein, Senior Director of Learning Partnerships at Northern Illinois University. Jason leads collaboration between NIU, school districts, community colleges, and education partners across the state. He co-facilitates the Illinois P20 network and works to strengthen pathways that connect learning to real-world opportunities. Before joining NIU, Jason spent nearly 25 years in Illinois public schools as a teacher, a principal, and an assistant superintendent. His work focused on transforming learning through authentic problem-based instruction and innovative use of technology and project management in school improvement. He holds degrees from University of Illinois, Illinois State University, and NIU. So please join me in welcoming both of these incredible leaders, and I look forward as we get to hear the newest in this topic here. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Jason Klein, if you're ready to take it over and get us started.
I am. Thank you so much. We're thrilled to be here today. Just a couple of quick pieces of background before we kick off our conversation. Illinois has set policy that is designed to support all learners with career readiness and post-secondary success. And that's been over the last 10 years in particular, that work has picked up. At the same time, the workforce environment of today and our global economy has continued to get more and more complex throughout that period. In my current role, as was just mentioned, I have the privilege of getting to work with school districts and post-secondary institutions across Illinois, and I can tell you there is so much great work being done in this area. There is so much improvement taking place, and yet there is still so much more to do. And so we're going to dig into some of that here today and what that means for not only educators, but in particular for parents and families as well. So kicking that off, Ken, what are the key things that you think students and parents need to know about career planning?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. There's several, Jason, and actually I'm gonna do a slide share here with the audience. And there's a QR code on here. If you're watching this, you can actually grab this slideshow for your reference. So the first 5 big things, and there's sort of a convergence of a number of factors, and a lot of them confront what I would consider conventional wisdom in the thinking. And I need to do a disclaimer before I say anything else today. Having given this presentation in one form or another for a decade and a half now, there's often the misconception that I'm somehow not in favor of students going to college, and nothing could be further from the truth. I have a number of really good college degrees myself, and they've served me very, very well. What I'm in favor of, though, is having really informed consumers about college, and also in helping us think differently about what post-high school means, because sometimes the language that we use is actually very limiting. And so the first thing I want to start with is actual jobs data about where jobs really are, what the distribution of them really looks like. And I'm going to point right here locally to the Chicago DuPage region. We'll talk about real U.S. college graduation rates. Those are things that aren't really well known for a variety of reasons. Chronic college debt, I think there's a growing understanding of that factor, but I'm going to dig into that a little bit. Underemployment rates. This has actually been around for a long time, but there's some recent research on this just in the last year or so that highlights what an issue this continues to be. And then the 5th big thing is wages relative to cost of living. I'm of the sort of the tail end of the baby boomers, and the truth is my generation was the most economically privileged in the United States history by far. The students coming out of high school and college today, they're coming into a far different world. And as leaders, as educators, we have to really understand what those economic trends are, because they should be influencing how we do the work. So let's take a look very quickly. First, this is the Chicago, Naperville, Elgin Bureau of Labor Statistics job market. This is where we are here in DuPage County. Now, while I'm talking about DuPage County, for any viewers that are in California, I do work in California, do work in New York, this data actually holds up really well in any zip code. So let's start with, of all the top jobs in DuPage County or the Chicago area, how many require a bachelor's degree or more? Well, it turns out it's less than 30%. And that trend actually holds up in almost every zip code across America. In fact, the largest distribution of really good jobs is actually in the space beyond a high school degree and before a 4-year degree. And there are, when we think of medicine, for example, people conventionally think of, well, doctor, nurse, those are 4-year plus degrees. But it turns out there are hundreds of other really, really good jobs within the medical field that often require certifications or associate degrees. And we don't think about those when we're advising students nearly enough. And so those really high demand jobs go wanting often, while kids, set off to go for degrees that maybe they don't want or don't need. And so that's part of what we need to really confront, is where jobs really, really are. You can see that we're in a region that is really well educated. And in general, when you find well educated regions, you'll find more affluent regions. So I don't want to dismiss the importance of people having an education. It's always going to be worthwhile. And I think there's value in education beyond even the financial merits of it. But when we're talking about career education for our students, the financial aspect of it has to be a big piece that we've got to consider. Secondly, I think there's this thinking that and I know that I was probably guilty of it as a high school superintendent. Our job is to get your kid through high school, get them graduated, get them enrolled, and we've done our job. Well, I think there's a higher bar that we need to hold ourselves to. The 4-year graduation rate at public universities is 33%. And in fact, colleges allow themselves a 6-year rate, something that we could never do at the high school level. And part of the reason that there's a 6-year rate is so many students go to school and they worry first about where they're going to school, and secondly, if at all, about why they're going to school. And that's why the title of this talk is Why Before Where. And so how many people on this call went to school thinking they were going to major in one thing, or even uncertain what they were going to major in, general studies, and then picked a major and maybe changed a major 2 or 3 times? Well, now you're looking at well beyond 4 years to graduate. So that's why the 6-year graduation rates are what they are. And a lot of students are dropping out. So that's another big factor that we just need to know. I am convinced, and I believe this because I was part of helping build a program to really address this. Any student, anybody that lands at a college, whether it's COD, whether it's University of Illinois, if they really know why they're there, if they have a good understanding, if they've had some good career education, and ideally some work-based learning prior to that, if they know all of the analytics about that, they're going to be much more likely to succeed. And that's the missing piece of the puzzle that we need to really address with this work. Student debt. This is actually the topic that got me first really supercharged on this issue. Back in about 2006, 2007, I remember seeing a news story about how student debt had exceeded credit card debt and auto loan debt. And I remember that headline, and I remember getting my attention. And I started really, really, really looking deeply then at all the aspects of the world of work and the economics behind it. And it was then really coming up on 2 decades that got me to fully understand we need to think a lot differently about what we're doing if we're going to serve our students really, really well. This debt problem is multifaceted. And our students of color in particular are the most likely students, our Black students or brown students, to be defaulting on their student loan debt. Many of them have student loan debt. Many of them were sent to college because we told them they should go. They didn't know why they were going. They maybe got a degree, they maybe didn't, but they're carrying the debt either way. The second factor, if you see the shifting burden, what has happened in the debt market is that student debt has actually maxed out. The federal debt has maxed out. And so the most common people carrying student debt now is actually our parents. And that factor alone should make us really think differently about the work. I'm not saying that debt isn't an appropriate thing to do when one is going to school, but this is where the ROI piece of it really comes into play. We actually took our consumer ed class at Maine Township, made it consumer ed and financial literacy, so that students who thought, for example, I want to become an accountant. The mean starting salary for accounting in the Chicagoland area is probably $70,000 to $75,000, and those are known things that you can actually find out. Using that number, what we want students to do is model various ways to get their accounting degree, so that as they were coming out of school, if they could project that they were going to earn $75,000, we didn't want them $125,000 in debt. And that was just a different way to look at the work, a more responsible way to look at the work, so that students and parents are just much more fully informed. On top of that, then, we weren't just telling them about the analytics. We had a number of accounting firms that were business partners with us, and our students who, for example, were taking the dual credit accounting course with us and felt like they were really adept at accounting. We would get them into a firm so that they could spend some time in that world of work, sort of trying accounting on. And that's really what the research is very clear about. If you do that and you have that response in high school, because some of the students who have that activity in high school go to an accounting firm, their response very well could be, hey, accounting's not for me. Well, that response happened as a junior in high school as opposed to a sophomore or junior in college. That's a design principle, and that's a design principle that for far too long we just haven't included in high schools, and we can include it in high schools. In my district, we had over 1,200 business partners. What we found is the business partners were really, really eager to be a partner in this because it actually helped them. That accounting firm that had our students coming in and doing internships, well, guess what they were also doing? They were having students audition for jobs later on, and they were finding good employees themselves while also serving our students and giving them that really, really good information. And then just knowing how much you can expect to earn is a big piece of the puzzle. We can't just say, just go to college, any degree will do. That just simply isn't precise enough, and we can do better on that. The next
Ken,
thing.
can I interject?
Yeah,
Can I interject real quickly there? So while we're mostly holding questions till the end, we literally have a question from a parent about their daughter who wants to be an accountant. So if we can just pause right here and ask this question, I couldn't help but interject. So there's two sub questions. So a couple of things they've written. One is their daughter does want to be an accountant, and the family is only going to be able to help pay for some college. So question one is laser-like focused on exactly what you're asking about right now, and that is, how can she pursue that accounting degree in a way that is as low cost as possible and still effective for advancement into the field of accounting? What are your thoughts about that? And then I have a quick follow-up from them.
So we actually saw an interesting trend, and I've actually met with some folks at COD around this, because one of the things that started happening when our students were doing that return on investment exercise is students who previously wouldn't have considered, going to a community college for a year or two would have always thought, I must go to a 4-year degree. As they did the return on investment, what they were able to find out, if I go 2 years to my community college and then do my terminal degree at Loyola, which has a really good accounting school, or Illinois or Northern Illinois, there's any number of them out there, I can reduce the debt of this well below what I can expect to earn. And so that's an exercise that is, I think, a prudent and a responsible way to look at the work. So that's the first thing. And even if this family that's asking the question, even if their school's not doing this, there are ways to do that. They can find out if they can get on like the Indeed platform. Jobs EQ is one of the things. COD might even have this, but you can find literally by zip code the demand and the mean starting salaries for jobs, and using that's a way to calculate what I can expect to earn, and then you can literally model out multiple pathways to get there. So that would be the first thing I would do. The other thing that we found is increasingly when we were interjecting our students into the world of work, we found employers who valued finding future employees so much that they would often help offset the cost of work. And we found that in a number of sectors. And so there's a lot of ways to go about this, but it starts with really looking differently at the work.
So then the other question from this parent, I presume, but from this family is, how do they know if the world will even need accountants in 30 years? How do we help families and frankly, educators too, with those kind of workforce projection questions as things change so quickly?
So, and when I talk about this work, I talk about the concept of durable skills. And have been an advanced tech person. I was a high school English teacher, but also a computer science teacher, and I've been in, I think at the forefront of some of the things with tech. AI has been around longer than it's probably than we've been aware of it. I don't think it's going to go away, but I also believe very strongly in the power of the human mind. It's still the most remarkable, powerful instrument that's ever been created. And the thing that this person's child has going for them is, I'm assuming that they have numeracy. Numeracy is an enduring skill. Literacy is an enduring skill. Critical thinking is an enduring skill. Information literacy is an enduring skill. And those skills, I think, will help to augment and offset things that we probably can do with AI moving forward in the future. And so I think continuing to have students value, and frankly, schools value building those skills, those durable skills that will withstand the test of time, is probably the most responsible thing that we can do. And so I can't promise, that there will be the demand for accounting in 30 years that there is today, but I believe there's always going to be a demand for accounting. It may be at a higher level. It may be someone who is managing, a larger workload or working in a different way. But I think the accounting is not necessarily going to go away. It's been around since we've been counting. So I think it's probably here to stay in some fashion.
So before I kick it back to Ken, just one reminder, and we've got I've got questions coming in 3 different ways to me, but if you do have a question, you're online right now in real time as we do this, please feel free to drop it in either the chat or the Q&A. I've also got some questions making their way to me through direct messages. Ken, pick it up and keep us going. Thanks.
Okay, so the next factor that people need to know, and this is, there's really good research that was just published a year ago in the spring of 24, but it confirms long-held data that I've been aware of and that I've used in this presentation, and that is, even though the completion rates for students going to college has never been anywhere close to 100%, those that have been graduating have often been underemployed. And underemployed simply means that they're working in a job that either didn't require a 4-year degree or the degree that they got didn't lead to livable wage employment. And so that's a piece of the really good counseling that high schools need to do for students. And even at middle schools and elementary schools can begin some of this work, that they need to understand that all college degrees have value. I'm not going to devalue college degrees, but when it comes to direct livable wage employment, they're not all created equally. And so knowing that and understanding that is a big piece of the puzzle. And unfortunately, if you are underemployed, what the research says, if you're underemployed a year out of college, you have a 90% probability to be underemployed for a decade. And again, think about the other factors if you're carrying debt and things like that. So this is a call to really doing this work a lot more precisely than we've ever done. The other factor that our students are coming into is that we're coming up on about 4 decades now, where prior to that, from post-World War II to about the mid-70s, as productivity rose in this country, so did wages, in a direct linear correlation. For about the last 4 decades, productivity has continued to raise, but wages have flattened. So our students are actually working for relatively less money than I was coming out of high school in 1979, and that is a real factor, especially when we talk about the next things that I'm going to talk about. So if you look at the arrow down the bottom left-hand corner where, we talk about what jobs are. And so we so often say, like this one says, college is more crucial than ever. When we say the word college, I think 90% of us think 4-year degrees and above. And again, I want to point back to that largest distribution of good jobs is actually in the space beyond a high school degree, but before a 4-year degree. So that's our certifications, our industry certifications, our associate degrees, and those need to be considered as part of the educational pathway too. We've just kind of virtually ignored those, and yet that's where most of the good jobs are, and they're attainable at a much lower cost than most 4-year degrees are. So we need to think differently about that. So along with the costs, our housing costs are exponentially higher relative to wages today than they've been in modern history. And that can't be overlooked. I promise you, any parent who's got a recent college graduate who's paying rent in an apartment somewhere in the United States knows what I'm talking about. It isn't just the cost of a house relative to mean household income. It's all forms of living. So think of these triangulation of things that are happening. We got too many students coming out of college that are underemployed. They're working for lower wages, even if they're fully employed. The cost of their actual living is higher relative to those wages that have been stagnated. So you have this triangulation of really big factors that our students are walking into. The margin of error for our students has never been greater than it is right now. And we can't keep saying to ourselves, just go to college and everything's okay. That just has never been true. And I think we can do better for our students. I think we have to do better. The next thing, I know I kind of jumped out to the other factors, but I do want to add this because I know we're coming up on time. Here's a recent finding that is really, really important in all of this. And this has been expressed in a lot of different ways, but the bottom line is poverty is more sticky in America than it's ever been. Now, those of you that have done any research and you've looked at declining mobility rates in the United States, that's another way to express this. And if you've done research in this field for the last 2 decades, what you will have found is that compared to other advanced nations, the US has a lower mobility rate. And what that means is if you're born in poverty, your chances of escaping poverty are lower in the United States than they are in a lot of other advanced countries. It's actually gotten worse. And in fact, just recently, Raj Chetty and his colleagues at Harvard at Opportunity Insight have found that poverty has become a more powerful variable than race in this question. And that is a big deal because most of our districts in DuPage County and all across the country, we are serving students who are increasingly coming from poverty. And I always have felt a strong passion and urgency to make sure that we can change the trajectory of a student's life. And it's more precise and requires a higher degree of counseling from us than just simply saying, get college ready and go to college. It's more complex than that. And that's why this topic is so important, because I really want to change this. I think if we do school at an optimum level, we take a student, any student where they are, we find out what they love, what they hope to do, how they want to change the world, and we help match that to a career trajectory that they can get to in an economically responsible way that helps them obtain a livable wage with growth potential. If we do that, we don't just change their life, we change their children's lives and ultimately their grandchildren's lives. That's how you change poverty in America. And so this topic is just so important for all of us.
Yeah, first of all, I agree with that wholeheartedly, and I'll interject that I feel very lucky to work at an institution that's been recognized for its ability to impact students' mobility when it comes to socioeconomic status. With that said, I do want to shift a little bit here as I kind of watch the clock. You brought up durable skills a little bit earlier. Another term that we're using for those in school districts across Illinois are the essential skills, because the Illinois State Board of Ed has issued these cross-sector essential employability competencies. And then, of course, in the public discourse, they get called the soft skills pretty frequently. But with all that said, what would you say, and I'm going to have a follow-up question after you answer this, but what are the essential skills moving forward that all of our students, all of parents' children need to have in the future here for success?
I think they're all as you said, soft skills. They're all the things that we've heard about and know about: the ability to work in teams, the ability to contribute equally in those teams, the ability to think critically. But I also think there's another piece, and actually, Gilda queued this up. I've done a podcast about Jennifer Wallace's Never Enough, and if you haven't read it, it's a must read. I think part of what we've done, the mistake that we've done, is we have tried to delay resiliency of our children, the going through the absolutely necessary learning experience of failure and learning from failure and getting back up. All of us know, those of us that are adults and we've had to work through things in our lives, failure is part of the human condition. And I think creating opportunities for students to learn from failure is maybe perhaps the most essential thing that we can do. We can try to delay it, but the fact is, I think we do more harm than good if we delay learning from failure. It's how students learn. If you want to know why, I'm a neuroscience junkie in addition to this stuff. If you want to know why students play video games for 10 hours and barely stop to go to the restroom, it's because they actually have a dopamine drip. They are failing all the time, but they're getting clues and they can't wait to test those clues at the next level. The difference is between that and school is that the cost of failure in the video game is actually very low. They hit restart and that's it. In schools, we actually have a high cost of failure. We punish, we grade, we do all these kind of things. And it actually demotivates students from continuing to learn. So thinking about how humans really learn is another big piece of this puzzle. If you apply neuroscience to how learning happens, you'll do far more formative assessment, far less summative assessment, and you will actually give students opportunities to learn from that failure, because it turns out our students are capable of things that always exceed our expectations if we create the right conditions to allow that to happen and not create conditions where we actually try to exclude them from that. I think we do a disservice to our students when we do that.
Yeah, so first of all, you're absolutely right. When we look at the real motivations behind what makes us actually learn in our life, sometimes there's some mismatches with what we do in formal settings. With that said, you gave a great example there with the video games. If I'm a parent, and I am, what would be your advice to me and other parents in terms of how we help create those conditions for our children where failure is allowed to both take place and then can lead to additional learning, some of that positive risk taking around learning that's part of the process? What advice would you have for parents?
I think, there's been a tendency for, you've heard the term helicopter parents, and there's any number of terms for it. And those of us in education, we're all aware of this. And frankly, as parents, we've probably been guilty of it. I'm not throwing stones at anybody. I think as a parent, you generally want your students, your children to really succeed. And that's your highest motivation ever. So it's not coming from a bad place. But that old school notion of, you've got a problem, try to figure it out on your own instead of reaching for an easy answer or having somebody deliver the answer. How can you this is actually how we develop critical skills and information literacy, and the ability to think on our feet and to think broadly. I think is just, instead of being rescued, allow students to work through problems is probably the easiest way I could say it.
And so with that said, let's go back to the financial literacy piece. Obviously, that's pretty essential. I know that in the work I do, we spend a lot of time, even in dual credit conversations, really thinking about the implications on financial aid of dual credit, both positive and then some of the hidden pitfalls that may be there if we're not doing that good career readiness coaching for all students and giving them those experiences along the work-based learning continuum. What would be your advice, again, for parents in this case, but this is probably also advice that educators, from teachers to counselors to administrators, can also latch on. What would be your advice for how to help themselves as adults understand the current situation around finance, career pathways, and post-secondary, as well as then supporting our students, our children, with understanding those things?
So it's knowing everything that I've said up to this point, but then there's a few other things. These are some myths that I think we need to bust in schools, that this isn't our job. And I've literally heard teachers say, well, kids need to go away to college to figure it out. And that's it's an elitist construct that I think we need to think differently about, that there isn't anything we can do about it. And in fact, there's a lot you can do about it. And I would argue that in a really robust good system, we began talking about careers even in elementary school. There are fabulous programs like World of Work. Unfortunately, a lot of our students come to us and they're underdreamed. And part of our job is to dream them up, to help them understand that, yes, you love art, you love science, you love music. Well, let's think about how one would have a career in one of those things that you already love. Again, that's matching the passion for that. And then the fifth thing, as long as we get students ready for college and enroll, we've done our job. And I just think there's a higher bar for this. Stop treating college like it's a vanity license plate. And those are all wonderful colleges, and it's great to go there, but we're asking the wrong questions. Instead of asking students where you're going, ask why you're going, and what do you know about those things. So I think that's a big piece of the puzzle. And don't just ask them. As a school, we need to set the foundation for that learning. That's a learning activity that we need to do. I'm going to skip over this, and then finally, I'm getting to the answer to your question now, Jason. This is really it. This is when students start thinking about careers. They start thinking about it in kindergarten, and a lot of them by 8th grade, most of our students have thought about it. And I think we can help facilitate that. It's a natural conversation. It doesn't have to be a one-off. It's not tracking. It's actually really helping students, enriching students for the lives that they lead. If we think about our students that come, from our most privileged homes, they have access to folks that have advanced degrees and work in interesting fields, and they have more opportunity often to know about these things than all of our students. And I think all of our students should actually know about those things. Focusing on your child's passions, that's a big thing. And their why, not just making a lot of money, although I certainly want, livable wage is a term that I often use. Allow children to explore options and investigate careers. I think that, Jason, this also goes to your earlier question about, let students follow their own path and figure things out and do a lot of investigation on their own. Certainly we can help and we can provide platforms for that. And then continue asking about their experiences and what they're learning. And then the research on wage earning for every career, use that for the ROI of the cost. The lifelong learning, I think, is part of the learning how to learn from failure. I think one of the reasons that we often demotivate students is because everything is binary and it's you either pass or you fail. And I think we need to understand that failure is actually an absolute important and essential piece of learning. If you look at everybody that's ever been wildly successful, they've had far more failures behind them than they've had successes. And that's the way that the real world works. And then finally, skills and credentials. Those are actually becoming the most valuable currency in the job market. And we need to really understand that as schools. Just knowing the value of that, I think, is probably as important as anything.
All right. Well, we've got some great questions, and I want to jump to those. The first I'm going to ask is this one. This is from a family that's new to their school, and their child's a junior in high school. And so obviously that's an interesting moment, right? There's a lot going on at that moment in time. And so they say their son wants to be looking into careers, but he doesn't know where to start and they don't know where to start to help him. Who should he, so this is great because they're not saying who should we as the parents talk to, but who should he, their son, talk to at school?
Yeah. And I'm fortunate. One of my consulting roles is with the DuPage Regional Office of Education. And so we are actually working together with the DuPage County schools to create an ecosystem. I'm going to go back up actually to this one. Almost every high school in DuPage County is on a platform called School Links. They actually came and developed features of it when I was at Maine Township. And so we are actually exploring what's called an intermediary level account, where we're going to be able to thread all of the business partners that are nested within the high schools using the platform and match that with students' career plans. So the first question I would ask for that student is to go to their counselor. Most of the high schools in DuPage County, or many of the high schools in DuPage County, have activated that career planning element within School Links, and those that haven't will be doing that very, very soon. But that's the first question I would ask, because once you build that career that individual career plan in School Links, now you have access to a lot of analytic feeds. So let's just say, for example, let's go back to the accounting example. And let's say that I have in my career plan, I'm interested in accounting, I've taken a dual credit course, and you have a business partner in there, and it could be an accountant who just wants to be a mentor. Well, if they put that in as a business partner, that's going to get direct analytically fed to that student that wants to be an accountant. And now you've created a connection using a platform that can create a human connection beyond that, because it's the machine logic and then it's the human connection that's part of that. So those are the questions I would ask. And that's part of the work that I'm doing in the county, is really trying to get people to go forward with their work in School Links and build career planning. And you know, some districts are further ahead than others, but all of them, I think, are really interested and passionate about it and see the need to do it. And I think, but I'd start with the counselor. And the truth is, when I left Maine Township, we had a weekly advisory, and all of our staff was really into this. They saw this as an essential mission. I think teachers can think differently and see themselves as more than just teachers, but also career, advisors too. I taught English, I taught computer science. I should be able to talk to my students about what could you do with a degree in English? What could you do with a degree in computer science, for example?
So this next question comes from an educator's perspective, and I'll preface this a little bit I'll answer part of it first, Ken, and then I'll kick it over to you if that's okay. But and this is thinking about that work-based learning continuum and those authentic experiences, both in the school and then certainly outside the school and in the workplace. How do we navigate finding those opportunities for students is the question. I typically run into issues with workplaces regarding insurance, liability issues, confidentiality issues. And so I want to quickly address that second one and just mention, and I apologize if this comes off as a plug, it's not intended that way, but the Illinois P20 network, we're continuing to do a lot of work within regions, helping educate partners, business and community partners, on some of the myths that there exist in those areas. We've seen regions of the state that have made real progress on some of those things. But ultimately, in my experience, a lot of that is the building of those relationships between school districts and partners, or regionally building those relationships and then being able to start addressing those things. Ken, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, having actually built a program that had over 1,200 business partners, I can tell you that when we began, there was skepticism. I had a board member that said, well, these businesses aren't going to work with kids. Nothing could be further from the truth. And in fact, what we found is that the businesses often needed things that our students were bringing to bear. We had students build web platforms, build marketing plans, build really value-added things for our business partners. Our students actually helped keep some businesses going during COVID, and it takes work. You can't just say, we want to do it. We had to develop and hire a staff with a model that really didn't exist, to both cultivate the business partners, to cultivate the relationships, to cultivate the experiences. Now, experiences can come on a continuum, and this is where platforms like School Links can help. And it's everything from, because now you can do a lot of things virtually, you can access information without actually stepping there. But School Links allows you to connect even a mentor with a student. And you will be amazed at how willing your community is to do this. I've often said this, done at scale, this is a community revitalization program. And I know many, many examples across the state of Illinois where this advanced work has actually helped businesses go out and compete for jobs because they built a pipeline for employees. There are, down in Southern Illinois, Vienna, the local trade union is actually paying for the training costs for high school students to provide them their journeyman card. And they're doing it because it's a win-win situation for them. There's a symbiotic relationship. So I promise you that the business community out there wants to hear from you. And all of those things that people say, well, these are barriers, they're solvable barriers. We had hospital partnerships. We had medical partnerships. I had students in dental offices, in medical offices, and all of those are solvable. They aren't easy, but the payoff for doing it, the service that you can give to your students is absolutely worth it.
Awesome. Well, before I go to the next question, just a quick call out. We have a Maine West warrior from the class of 93 saying thank you and commenting now on the experiences that their junior in high school is getting at Glenbard North with the tools the district has made available. So that's fun. But the next question is, this is from a parent. How do I know what our school is doing to prepare my child for a career? And that's that challenge of school home communications. And then their follow-up question, which is maybe even the more important one, and that's what should they be doing to support their child with thinking about careers at home?
So one of the features of School Links is that we actually could allow parents to log into School Links and they could use some of the tools available there. And so that would be one question I would ask of the school, because if you can get into School Links, there are all sorts of resources now that become available to students and parents. And so I think what you're going to see is any of the districts in DuPage County that haven't already built the individual career plans for students, they're going to begin to do that. And just simply getting kids rostered in there to build their plans right away gives them access to a lot of tools. The second thing is, go about this as a problem-solving exercise. This is a good exercise that parents can do together with their students. What are you interested in? What do you know about it? What do you want to know about it? And start a search of the relevant questions. You know, one of the durable skills, frankly, is the ability to generate questions. You know, we've often make that a construct about finding the right answer, but the truth is the smartest people in the room are the ones asking the best questions. And so helping your students create questions about the careers that they want, doing that together as a parent, that's something that every parent can do. If you've got the internet, you can find way more information about this than you would ever imagine, but it starts with developing the right questions. And Jason, you know, if you're even going to go at this with AI, asking the right types of questions is one of the ways you get higher quality answers.
So, Ken, it's almost like you read my mind on what the next question I was going to ask you here from the Q&A. So this is referring back to something you've already talked about earlier, but as you were giving out a lot of information, we have a question here about, you know, what was the website? What are the places I should be looking at this? How can I find information by zip code or region and earnings? And I know I will tell everybody there are a lot of tools out there, but this is a very common question. One of the experiences I've been lucky enough to have the last 4 or 5 years is bringing teachers to this for the first time and having them look at workforce projection data that they've never looked at before and the ahas from there. And so Ken, what are the places you would send people to?
So again, actually, and this is a tremendous resource, School Links actually provides some of this data now. So getting the student rostered, I think as schools start utilizing this right now, then parents will have that resource available to them. Bureau of Labor Statistics has a ton of really good searchable data in it as well that you can find. There are regional areas. So I mentioned, you know, we're the Chicago Elgin, and those often are buttressed by a lot of reports that you can get in terms of where the growth potential are, the top job areas, and you can even drill down to, you know, how much education is needed, what the typical salary is. So that's another big, I think another big tool that you can have. The good news is almost every high school in DuPage County is on School Links right now, which in and of itself is a really good intuitive resource that people can use.
Awesome. Thank you so much. One more question here, and this one is coming to us from an administrator. I'm an experienced administrator, but they're trying to focusing on career outcomes is new for them. And they're trying to do it for all students. And so this is great because it ties together the family piece and the school piece here. They're asking from a school's perspective, what should I be doing to help us engage families in this work? So what are the things that you would offer to other counselors, teachers, and school leaders on how they can connect with families?
So I was a superintendent of a high school district. I used to go and do annual presentations, even at the elementary districts, to introduce them to these concepts. Our high schools, when we would have our orientation nights for students, we would begin talking about this early on. I mentioned we had a weekly advisory where we did a lot of this work. We had a set of tier 1, which is everybody gets them, experiences for students. We had a checklist of items that actually we could nest into School Links. And then just one more thing, when School Links came and their developers were working with us, I wanted to treat this as a research study. I really wanted to know how our kids were doing 4 years, 5 years, 6 years out. They built an alumni feature. It's in every School Links. If you've got School Links, you've got the alumni feature. But that's one of the ways that schools can use that to really track their kids down the road, to know how they're doing and ask questions like, what did we do well? What can we do better? You can find out how kids are doing, and that should help sort of come back and inform, your work a little bit better. But I think we used to have panels. We bring different industries in, and we bring a cross section of people in just to learn together from that. You have to treat this as a learning journey and build a learning community around this. It's complex, it's messy, and you'll never be done learning. And so I think the more that you can bring people together and really be transparent about why we need to do this. I think I fronted this presentation with the why behind this, and then learn together. And here's the other interesting thing that happened, Jason. I found this. Of the 1,220 business partners we had in Maine Township, a significant number of those were actually our own parents and alumni. Mm-hmm. And it was just an amazing thing that happened. This actually became, from a fundraising standpoint, part of our Ed Foundation, a big piece of the puzzle, because it can become a real central organizing feature around education. If you think about it in its simplest form, your objective here is to try to change the trajectory of every single student toward the best outcome possible in the most economically responsible way, finding a path to get them doing something that they love, that they have passion about. If you can do that, what higher purpose do we have in education than that? And people can wrap their head around this, and it can become and should become a really good community building exercise if done well. I've witnessed it, and I believe it can happen.
Yeah, so I think Ken's comments about alumni and parents and families are not only absolutely on point. I love that at the very end you use the word community, because one of the big places that we've seen work-based learning be able to kick off is also that reach out across the staff of even some of the smallest districts in the state. Who knows somebody who's got a brother-in-law, a sister-in-law, a neighbor? And so that idea of the community coming around this, I agree with Ken wholeheartedly. That is the key to those initial steps. And then, as we've seen in Ken's previous experience, once that ball gets rolling, it kind of spreads like wildfire. And we have to keep fine-tuning the work as we go, but the work takes on a life of its own. And so I do want to ask one last question here from the chat, and then I believe that Gilda's got a question that we'll come back to in just a minute. But first, I'm going to call out this question. I want to thank everybody. There's also some great comments in the chat. So if you are on right now and can scroll through the chat, check those out, because we have some other really knowledgeable people offering their ideas and experiences too. But before Gilda's question, Ken, what career clusters do you think are maybe more durable in the face of the impact of AI and its impact on entry-level jobs?
Well, Jason Hahn, who is the founder CEO of NVIDIA, just said like a week ago, the AI infrastructure build is going to be powered by electricians and plumbers. I mean, he came out and said that. AI is not going to replace indoor plumbing. It's not going to do the indoor plumbing for you. It's not going to do wiring for your home. I think those, obviously, the trades are areas that I think are going to be with us, and there's going to be limits on what AI can do. But even AI, I think those of us that, remember different things that have happened in technology, I still want to hold off a little bit of skepticism. I still believe strongly in the beauty and the power and the magic of the human mind. And I don't think that that's going to be replaced anytime soon. And I think helping our students be creative problem solvers that have confidence in themselves, that are not afraid of being wrong or failing, and are allowed to learn from that. I think that is how we serve our students and, frankly, communities in the best possible way.
Gilda.
Two thoughts, such a wonderful presentation. Two thoughts come to mind that really spoke to me. I love this framing of thinking about problem solving as opposed to letting our children experience failure. One of our speakers, and every single speaker talks about this, it seems to be a challenge for parents today with the best of intentions as we try to smooth the road for the child as opposed to preparing the road for the child. But one of the speakers once said something that really spoke to me about when we do for them what they can do for themselves, we deny them the success of any success that comes with overcoming a failure. So I thought that was an important point. One of the most important points I'm taking away from this is the important role of parents. We can't assume schools are doing it. We can't assume that what worked in the past will work today. So we really, as parents, have to take an active role, read the paper, look online, talk about how the cost of homes, talk about how much your home costs, and most importantly, let us make sure that our children know that what's waiting for them is an enjoyable experience. If we talk about all of the problems of adulthood, why would a child ever want to become an adult? So I think it's important to really think about the good, have your hobbies and share that as well. So Jessica Santi has a question as well. So Jessica, you're up.
All right. Hi, everyone again. I thought I would point out, I was trying to move the camera here.
Perfect.
I thought I would point out a question that struck me in the chat as well. So Ken, for students that are already engaged at the college level, who are already in a liberal arts area or just recently graduated, and they do possess those strong enduring skills and that we talked about, any advice for kind of how they navigate that journey in their current space of where they are?
Yeah, and as someone that got a liberal arts degree, I think a lot of it depends on what the degree is.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're finding, and I can use my own son as an example. My youngest son got a degree in biology, which sounds good on paper, but actually didn't lead him to livable wage employment. He actually came back, went to Thailand and taught English in a 6 through 12 school, came back and got a TESOL degree. He's now a professor in Thailand teaching Thai teachers who are going to teach English as a second language. And so I think part of it is, if you're in that spot, you've got something in your hand that's valuable. But in order to figure out, how to maximize that, you also have to figure out what you really love and what you really want to do. And I think, obviously the long range looking at that is to try to have that occur much, much sooner than, when you get to college. And I think that's a design principle that I would advocate for everybody. But there are plenty of things that people can do. And I would start with, what are you good at? What do you love? Because, I was an English major, but I always tested higher in math. And so I always loved statistics and probability and things like that. And I think finding those things that you love to do and want to do, and then trying to match that with a job is probably the best outcome you can have. And then also continue to learn. That's the other thing too, is I think it's always been true, but it's never been more true, that we're going to have to be raising students who are learners, who are resilient and continue to learn and continue to grow. And the last thing I would say on this is, don't be afraid of looking at industry, certifications and things like that as well. Even if you've got a degree, that's actually one of the largest segment of people that are continuing education. People who have 4-year degrees are coming back and, they're getting an associate or they're getting a work certification because it actually is helping lead them where they want to be.
Yeah, I also just want to add, I appreciate that you talked about how we're not discouraging on college education, right, in this conversation, because I think that we could have probably a whole day of discussion on the purpose of education, right? And we need to acknowledge that that post-secondary degree provides so much for our society. It provides an educated populace, which is the core to our civic responsibilities in our country and so forth. So there's lots of layers to this, but doing so in a fiscally responsible way, in a way that leads to passion and purpose in the careers that they choose, I think is fundamental in our work. So thank you. I appreciate hearing everything that you shared today and your expertise.
There are a few announcements that as we're coming to a close. The College DuPage is hosting the Regional College Fair, which will explore 165 colleges and universities in one place. I want to mention a GPS on December 10th at noon and at 7 p.m. Jeff Salingo has written a book. His first book was called Who Gets In and Why. The second book is called Dream School. Jeff Salingo will be in conversation with Ron Lieber, who is the financial editor at the New York Times, and his book is The Greatest Financial Decision Your Family Will Ever Make. So we'll continue this conversation at that time, and we're so grateful for the gift of your time. Outstanding, gentlemen, and we really enjoyed it. It was a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much. See you again. Take care.